I need you to imagine something with me. Imagine the moment when your eyes close in this world and open in a realm where truth cannot be debated, where every mask is stripped away and reality is undeniable. That is what happened to me. I died. And in that moment, I discovered something that shook me to the core. Something about speaking in tongues that no one had ever told me. There comes a moment when every heartbeat stops, when breath no longer fills the lungs, and the eyes no longer open to the world we know. That moment is death. Most of us avoid thinking about it, yet deep down we know it is the one appointment we cannot escape. What many fail to realize is that death is not the end. It is a doorway. When you step through that doorway, the illusions of this world collapse. The things you argued about, the doubts you clung to, the distractions that consumed you, all lose their weight. Beyond the veil, there is no hiding. There is no mask. There is no pretending to be strong when you are weak or righteous when you are corrupt. In that place, truth stands unclothed, shining brighter than any sun, cutting through every excuse. Crossing that line is unlike anything we imagine. On earth, we live with questions, with uncertainty, with shadows of truth distorted by human opinion. But when you die, there is only revelation. It is not a gentle suggestion. It is an overwhelming flood of reality that shakes every fiber of your being. You see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. You understand what really mattered and what was just noise. Suddenly, status, wealth, and the applause of people mean nothing. The only thing that matters is alignment with divine truth. In that realm, time is stripped away. Seconds and hours lose their meaning because you stand before eternity itself. And when eternity opens before you, you realize how short your earthly journey truly was. Every moment of hesitation, every excuse to put off faith or obedience, every compromise suddenly appears in its true scale. You see that the opportunities you wasted were not just moments, they were seeds of destiny. Some were planted and bore fruit, while others were left to wither because you never acted on them. And then comes the most sobering reality. The recognition that you cannot, because once you have crossed that threshold, the life you lived is the life you must now answer for. Beyond the veil, truth is not negotiable. You cannot argue with it, you cannot twist it, and you cannot escape it. You feel its weight and its purity pressing against your soul. For some, it is a moment of unspeakable peace, the confirmation that the path of obedience was not in vain. For others, it is a moment of trembling, realizing that they traded eternal truth for temporary pleasures. But in that overwhelming reality, there is also clarity. You begin to understand mysteries that seemed impossible to grasp on earth. You see why certain things were allowed, why certain doors closed, why certain hardships had to be endured. You recognize that the unseen battle for your mind and heart was far greater than you knew, and that even the smallest choices carried eternal significance. This encounter with divine truth is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because there is no more hiding behind excuses or ignorance. Liberating because it strips away the lies you once believed and confronts you with what is real. In that moment, you wish you had lived differently, thought differently, and valued differently. You wish you had spoken words of life more often, planted seeds of faith more generously, and silenced the doubts that now seem so small against the backdrop of eternity. Stepping beyond the veil teaches us something undeniable. Life on earth is preparation. Every thought, every action, every decision is building a story that will be read in the light of truth. Death does not erase the story. It reveals it. And when that revelation comes, there will be no room for regret, only the reality of what is. This is why we cannot afford to drift through life as if nothing matters. We cannot waste time living as though the unseen world is a fantasy. Life beyond death is more real than the ground beneath your feet. And when that moment comes for you, the question will not be how much you gained in this life, but how faithfully you aligned yourself with truth. Because when the veil lifts, you will discover that truth was never hiding. You were. And the shock of eternity is realizing that it was always calling you to live differently. The gift of tongues has long been a subject of fascination, confusion, and even division. For some, it is viewed as a strange phenomenon, sounds without meaning, a spiritual display that makes little sense to the natural mind. For others, it has been elevated to a badge of superiority, as though speaking in tongues alone proves a person's spirituality. Both of these extremes reveal the same issue: misunderstanding. The mystery of tongues has too often been clouded by misuse, pride, and ignorance, when in truth it is one of the most profound expressions of divine connection ever entrusted to humanity. At its core, the gift of tongues is not about performance. It is about communion. It is a spiritual language that bypasses the limitations of the human intellect and connects the spirit directly to the realm of God. Human words are bound by vocabulary, culture, and experience, but tongues transcend all of that, allowing communication that is unhindered by human weakness. It is the spirit speaking mysteries that the mind cannot fully grasp, a language that flows from a deeper place than thought or reason. Yet this is where the misuse often arises. Many approach tongues as if it is meant to impress people, to demonstrate spiritual status, or to create emotional excitement in a gathering. But tongues were never given as a performance for others. They were given as a lifeline for the believer. They were designed to build up the inner man, to strengthen what is weak, to align the soul with the will of God. When they are turned into a show, their true purpose is lost. On the other hand, there are those who dismiss the gift entirely because they do not understand it. They mock it as babbling nonsense or fanaticism. But what they fail to see is that tongues operate on a spiritual frequency, not a natural one. Just as radio waves are invisible but carry real messages, tongues carry communication that cannot be detected or explained by ordinary reasoning. To reject it simply because it does not fit the framework of human logic is to miss the beauty of a gift that was never meant to be contained within the box of intellect. The true meaning of tongues lies in intimacy and empowerment. When a believer prays in tongues, they are surrendering control of their limited vocabulary and allowing the Spirit to speak through them. It is an act of humility and faith, acknowledging that the mind does not have all the answers. It is also an act of warfare, for tongues release utterances that the enemy cannot decode, prayers that strike targets beyond the reach of human language. It is like speaking in a divine code that heaven understands perfectly, while hell trembles in confusion. Tongues also carry a mystery of transformation. As the Spirit communes with God, the believer's inner life is shifted. Fears begin to weaken, strength rises, clarity emerges, and faith is stirred. It is not simply about saying words. It is about tuning the soul to the frequency of heaven. Over time, those who walk in this gift begin to notice that they carry a deeper sensitivity to the presence of God, a stronger boldness in the face of adversity, and an unshakable assurance even when circumstances look impossible. The tragedy is that too many have either misused or misunderstood this gift, leaving it shrouded in controversy rather than revelation. But if you strip away the pride, the fear, and the confusion, what remains is something breathtaking. Tongues are not noise, but spiritual communication. They are not chaos, but order hidden from human perception. They are not a mark of superiority, but a tool for every believer to draw closer to God, to rise above weakness, and to stand firm in faith. To understand tongues is to understand that God has given humanity a way to speak beyond itself, to connect spirit, to bypass the barriers of intellect, and to experience the reality of His presence in a language not learned but received. This is the true mystery of tongues, not something to boast about, not something to fear, but something to embrace as a gift of intimacy, power, and transformation. Language is one of the greatest tools given to humanity, but it is also one of our greatest limitations. Every word we speak is confined by the boundaries of our vocabulary, our culture, and our understanding. There are times when we want to express what is deep inside us, yet words fail. We try to describe our pain, our longing, our worship, or our gratitude, but no sentence seems big enough to contain the depth of what we feel. That is where the power of spiritual language comes in. Tongues are not bound by the restrictions of human speech. They are a direct connection to heaven, a way of communicating that bypasses the frailty of human limitation and flows straight from the Spirit to the throne of God. When a person speaks in tongues, they are stepping beyond the natural into the supernatural. It is not the mind constructing phrases. It is the Spirit releasing utterances that come from a place beyond comprehension. The human intellect might not understand the words, but heaven does. It is as if the soul has been given a divine telephone line, a channel unbroken by interference, a voice that speaks the language of eternity. This connection allows a person to pour out their heart without filter, without fear of saying it wrong, without limitation of expression. This is why tongues carry such power. They enable the believer to pray when they do not know what to pray, to worship when words are too small, to intercede when the burden is too heavy. Have you ever felt such grief, such joy, or such intensity of spirit that words simply failed you? Tongues step into that gap. They give expression to what the Spirit knows, but the mind cannot articulate. They allow communication that transcends the natural and engages directly with the divine. The beauty of this language is that it also bypasses the barriers of the enemy. Human words can be overheard, misunderstood, or resisted. But tongues are a mystery to the powers of darkness. They are like encrypted messages sent straight to heaven, beyond the reach of interference. When you pray in this spiritual language, you are releasing divine communication that strengthens your spirit, confuses the enemy, and aligns you with the will of God, even when you don't consciously know what that will is. And this is where transformation begins. The more time you spend using spiritual language, the more attuned your spirit becomes to the frequency of heaven. Your heart grows more sensitive, your faith more resilient, your awareness of God's presence more acute. You begin to notice that your fears lose their grip, your doubts grow quieter, and your spirit grows bolder. The connection is not just about words going upward. It is also about strength flowing downward. Tongues are not only communication, they are communion. They are a lifeline that pulls you closer to the source of life itself. What makes tongues extraordinary is not only their function as a bridge to heaven, but their ability to shape the one who speaks them. Every time you engage in this language, you are stretching your spirit, enlarging your capacity, and opening yourself to greater dimensions of faith. It is as though the spirit is being exercised, strengthened, and renewed with every utterance. Over time, the believer who embraces this gift walks with a new confidence, not because they are strong in themselves, but because they have tapped into strength beyond themselves. Many misunderstand tongues because they try to measure them by the standards of human intellect. But the very point of spiritual language is that it transcends those standards. It is not designed to be understood by the natural mind. It is designed to bypass it. It is heaven's way of reminding us that we are more than flesh and blood, more than thoughts and logic. We are spiritual beings, created for communion with a spiritual God, and tongues are one of the most powerful tools to engage that reality. In the end, the power of spiritual language is this: it connects earth to heaven, weakness to strength, limitation to infinite possibility. It is not a ritual or a performance. It is a living connection, a direct line of communication between the human spirit and the creator of all things. And when you step into that connection, you discover that what once seemed impossible becomes possible because you are no longer speaking from your own mind. You are speaking from a place where heaven itself gives voice through you. Whenever something real and powerful exists in the spiritual realm, there will always be a counterfeit. Light will always have a shadow. Fire will always produce smoke. The same is true with the gift of tongues. What was given as a pure, holy, and empowering language of heaven has in many places been reduced to empty noise, emotional display, or worse, a tool for manipulation. The tragedy is that many cannot tell the difference between the counterfeit and the true. And so they either chase after false expressions or reject the real gift altogether. The counterfeit often begins with emotional hype. In Gather, the focus shifts from reverence to spectacle. People can be swept up in the energy of the crowd. Music swells, voices rise, and individuals feel pressure to perform something outwardly spiritual. In those moments, what emerges may sound like tongues, but it is not the overflow of the Spirit. It is the product of emotional imitation. People repeat sounds they have heard, mimic others around them, or release noise that stirs excitement but lacks spiritual depth. The appearance may be convincing, but the essence is missing. This is not to say that genuine tongues cannot carry emotion. They often do. When the Spirit moves, tears may flow, joy may erupt, and passion may ignite. But the difference lies in the source. True tongues are not born from pressure, hype, or the need to prove one's spirituality. They flow naturally, authentically, from the inner being when the Spirit gives utterance. They carry a weight, a presence, a power that is not manufactured by human effort. Those who have experienced both can sense the distinction. The counterfeit leaves you drained and empty. The true leaves you strengthened and renewed. One of the dangers of the counterfeit is that it shifts the focus from God to people. When tongues are used as a performance, the center of attention becomes the speaker rather than the one being glorified. It becomes a way of saying, "Look at me, see how spiritual I am," rather than, "Look at him, see how great he is." This subtle shift poisons the gift because what was meant to draw us closer to heaven is being used to elevate human pride. The true, however, humbles. Authentic tongues are not a badge of superiority. They are a tool of intimacy. They do not make you greater than others. They make you more dependent on God. They are not for public show, but for private strength. When the Spirit truly moves, there is no need to fake, no need to force, no need to impress. The utterance flows like a river, cleansing and refreshing, leaving the heart in awe of God's presence, rather than in awe of itself. Another mark of the counterfeit is confusion. Where noise abounds without order or purpose, the atmosphere becomes chaotic and the fruit is disorder. True tongues, while they may sound mysterious, always produce clarity in the spirit. They may not be understood with the mind, but they leave the heart aligned, the soul encouraged, and the atmosphere marked with peace rather than confusion. The Spirit never contradicts himself. What he inspires will always reflect his nature. This is why discernment is so vital. Not every sound is from heaven. Not every display is authentic. We must test the spirits, weigh the fruit, and seek the presence rather than the performance. If tongues leave us more focused on people than on God, more stirred in emotion but empty in spirit, then we must question their source. But if they leave us stronger, more grounded, and more in love with truth, then we can trust that the utterance was authentic. The greatest danger of the counterfeit is that it causes many to dismiss the real. People who see the hype, the show, the emptiness often conclude that the gift itself is false. In doing so, they throw away the treasure because they only encountered the imitation. But the presence of counterfeit does not invalidate the reality. It proves the value of the true. Counterfeit money exists because real money has worth. False tongues exist because true tongues carry power. The wise do not reject the genuine simply because counterfeits exist. Instead, they seek the real with greater hunger, knowing that what comes from God cannot be replaced by human imitation. In the end, the challenge is clear. Do not settle for noise when heaven has offered you a voice. Do not mistake hype for holiness or performance for presence. The true gift of tongues is a sacred language of intimacy and power, and it deserves reverence, not imitation. Seek it with humility, embrace it with discernment, and let it draw you deeper into the presence of God. Because when the truth flows, there is no confusion, no pride, no emptiness, only the unmistakable touch of the Spirit that leaves you transformed. When the gift of tongues operates in its true and pure form, it is not simply a mystical experience or a spiritual ornament to display. It is an instrument of transformation working deep within the life of the believer. Many see tongues only as a sound, but in reality it is a process of renewal. It reshapes the spirit, redefines identity, and releases authority. It is not about what comes out of the mouth alone, but about what happens within the heart as a result of that flow. The sound is the evidence, but the change is the purpose. At the level of the spirit, tongues become nourishment. Just as the body requires food to gain strength, the spirit requires spiritual sustenance to remain strong. When a person prays in tongues, they are feeding their inner being directly from the source of life. They bypass the limitations of the mind and allow their spirit to drink deeply from living waters that cannot be drawn with human effort. Over time, this consistent nourishment builds resilience. Doubt loses its grip, fear diminishes, and faith becomes a natural response rather than a struggle. The spirit begins to stand tall, unshaken by storms, because it has been strengthened from within. This inner strengthening begins to influence identity. Many people walk through life defined by what others have said about them, by their past failures, or by their own insecurities. They wear labels that were never meant for them: unworthy, incapable, unloved. But as tongues flow, something shifts. The spirit connects with the truth of who they really are, and revelation begins to rewrite identity. The believer starts to realize they are not defined by failure, but by grace, not marked by rejection, but by belonging. This is not a surface-level affirmation. It is a deep spiritual reprogramming. The voice of heaven speaks louder than the voices of the world, and identity is reshaped from the inside out. With identity comes authority. When a person knows who they are in the spirit, they begin to carry themselves differently. They no longer approach life as victims of circumstance, but as participants in divine purpose. Speaking in tongues activates this authority because it aligns the believer with the will of God, even when the mind cannot grasp it. In those moments of utterance, prayers are being spoken that address situations the believer may not even be aware of. Words are being released that shift atmospheres, confront unseen battles, and open doors of breakthrough. The authority is not rooted in personal strength, but in divine partnership. It is the authority of one who knows they are not speaking alone. Transformation through tongues is not instant, it is progressive. Like fire refining gold, it burns away impurities and reveals what was hidden beneath. Each time a believer enters into this flow, the spirit is shaped a little more, the identity is reinforced a little stronger, and the authority is exercised with greater confidence. Over weeks, months, and years, the difference becomes undeniable. Those who once lived in fear now walk in boldness. Those who once doubted themselves now move with assurance. Those who once bowed under the weight of circumstances now rise with unshakable resolve. The world may not understand it, but the fruit speaks for itself. A life touched by the reality of tongues looks different. There is a depth of peace, a strength in trial, and a clarity of purpose that cannot be explained by natural means. The believer becomes less reactionary to the noise of the world and more anchored in the whisper of heaven. They live with a quiet authority, not loud and boastful, but steady and undeniable. Their very presence begins to shift environments because they carry within them the imprint of transformation. Ultimately, speaking in tongues is not about sound, it is about change. It is about allowing heaven to reshape earth, starting with the soil of the human heart. It is about surrendering to a process that lifts you beyond weakness, redefines who you are, and equips you with authority to walk out your calling. This is the transformation that comes through revelation, a spirit made strong, an identity made secure, and an authority made real. And once you taste that transformation, you will never again see tongues as noise. You will see it as one of the greatest gifts for becoming who you were always meant to be. Every spiritual encounter, every gift, and every revelation carries with it a responsibility. Experiences can be powerful, overwhelming, and deeply emotional, but not every experience is rooted in truth. This is why discernment is essential, and why the call to alignment is one of the most urgent instructions for anyone who desires to walk in authentic faith. You cannot simply accept every feeling as divine, every voice as holy, or every experience as truth. You must weigh, test, and measure all things against the unshakable standard of God's truth. Without alignment, even the most dramatic encounters can lead a person astray. It is easy to be moved by what feels supernatural. A stirring in the heart, an emotional outburst, or an atmosphere charged with intensity can convince many that what they are experiencing must be from above. But truth is not measured by how it makes us feel. It is measured by its fruit and by its alignment with divine principles. If an experience leaves you puffed up with pride rather than humbled in awe, you must question its source. If a revelation pulls you away from purity, integrity, and love, then no matter how powerful it seemed, it cannot be from the one who is truth itself. Alignment demands that we filter every experience through the lens of what is eternal, not what is temporary. This call to alignment is also a safeguard. The spiritual world is not empty. It is full of voices, influences, and forces, some genuine and others deceptive. Without discernment, a person can confuse hype with holiness, noise with power, or imitation with authenticity. Testing experiences means asking hard questions. Does this draw me closer to God or only closer to self? Does this build humility or does it feed ego? Does this align with truth that has stood unshaken across generations? Or is it simply an emotional thrill that fades with time? These questions protect the heart from being tossed about by every new wind of teaching or every wave of excitement. But alignment is not only about filtering experiences, it is about shaping your entire life around truth. You cannot live divided, with your spirit claiming to walk in revelation while your daily choices contradict what is right. To align means to bring your words, your actions, your habits, and your thoughts into agreement with the truth you claim to believe. It is not enough to have moments of spiritual fire if the rest of your life is marked by compromise. The strength of a building lies not in its decoration, but in its foundation. In the same way, the strength of your spiritual life lies not in moments of excitement, but in consistent alignment with truth. The power of alignment is that it brings clarity and stability. When your life is aligned, you no longer need to chase every experience to feel close to God. You live with a steady awareness of His presence. You no longer swing between highs and lows because truth anchors you regardless of circumstance. And you no longer wonder whether an experience was real or false because you judge it not by emotion, but by whether it aligns with what is eternal. Alignment also unlocks authority. A person who is aligned does not need to shout or prove their spirituality. Their authority flows naturally because their life is in order, just as a soldier draws authority from being aligned with his commanding officer. The believer draws authority by being aligned with truth. Misalignment, however, weakens. It opens doors for confusion, for pride, and for deception. The one who walks in alignment may not always be the loudest, but they will be the most effective because they carry the weight of authenticity. Ultimately, the call to alignment is a call to integrity. It is an invitation to live without division, without hypocrisy, without pretending in public what is not true in private. It is about living in such a way that your spirit, your words, and your actions all speak the same language. When this happens, every experience is weighed, every gift is grounded, and every revelation is tested against the standard of truth. This is where true strength lies, not in having more encounters, but in living in alignment with what is real. The spiritual world is filled with mysteries, but one truth stands firm: only what is aligned with the eternal will endure. Everything else will fade, no matter how dramatic it feels in the moment. So test your experiences, guard your heart. Weigh every word, every utterance, every revelation, and above all, align your life with truth. Because alignment is not just protection, it is power. It is the difference between being deceived and being transformed, between chasing shadows and walking in light, between living a life of emptiness and living a life anchored in what is eternal. We began with the reality of death and what lies beyond it. We saw that when the veil lifts, all illusions vanish and truth stands undeniable. From there, we stepped into the mystery of tongues, not as noise, not as performance, but as a divine language designed to connect spirit to spirit. We explored the power of this spiritual language, how it bypasses the frailty of human words and creates a direct line to heaven. But with every truth, there is a counterfeit. Many have confused hype for holiness, yet we learned that the genuine gift carries transformation, not performance. And transformation is the heart of it all. Tongues reshape the spirit, reinforce identity, and release authority. They shift us from insecurity to confidence, from weakness to strength, from fear to faith. Yet none of this is safe without alignment. Every gift, every revelation, every encounter must be tested against truth, so that what we carry is authentic and enduring. So what is the ultimate call? It is to live awake, discerning, and aligned. To recognize that every thought, every utterance, and every experience is shaping your destiny. To embrace the gift not as a show for men, but as a lifeline for your spirit. To walk in transformation that cannot be faked, because it flows from a place deeper than words. And to anchor yourself in truth, so that when the counterfeit comes, you cannot be moved. This is not about chasing the spectacular. It is about becoming authentic. It is about letting your life be the evidence that heaven has touched earth through you. Because in the end, what matters most is not how loud you spoke, how long you prayed, or how many experiences you collected. What matters is whether your spirit was strengthened, your identity secured, your authority real, and your life aligned with truth. So let this be your decision. Step beyond the illusions, embrace the true, walk in transformation, and align with what is eternal. For when you do, you will discover that the language of heaven is not just about sound. It is about becoming everything you were created to be.